as Jeff mentioned, we are out here in Oregon City, the end of the historic Oregon City, Oregon Trail. And to get to your question, we spent decades as a team working with people on their finances, and it was probably 10 years ago we realized that there was really no good process documented to kind of help people through the common things that we need to know about. And I think often I have conversations with people and they say, why don't they teach this stuff as a basic high school course? Why don't we know what the difference between a will or a trust is? Why don't we know what to save? Why don't we know how to prepare the next generation for inheriting our stuff? And so it was at that encouragement, along with the inspiration of one of our beloved clients we call the Godmother, that we came up with this process, and that was 10 years ago. And since then, we've written a book and done a lot of videos, and really had a lot of fun. And we're all very passionate about teaching people this process. And so we've kind of said, hey, this is going to be our mission. We manage finances as part of our practice, but we want to make sure that everybody has this level of understanding and this process in place to enable you to have financial success within your household. So it's just been a wonderful experience for us. So I suppose, Jeff, should I, at this point, go through the laborious task of sharing my screen, that first challenging piece of technology,
Oh,
and get
please
started?
do.
All
Sure.
right.
And in the meantime, to do a little tap dance for everybody, I will uh, add our events uh, page link into the chat while you're working over there. So it's
Wonderful. Well, good so far. It looks like it's coming up roses. So um, I think there we are. So hopefully everybody's staring at what I like to call one of the eighth wonders of the world. It is the Oregon City elevator. And I like to have a couple fun pictures in a presentation just so you don't get tired of looking at me. But these are fun photos. On the left side of the screen is the Oregon City elevator when it was being built in 1955. There's a really cool house at the time called the Chase Mansion directly behind it. And then on the right side is the elevator as it stands today, with our office building directly behind it. So we feel very fortunate to get to come to the end of the Oregon Trail, at the top of the Oregon City elevator, and work out of this beautiful location 5 days a week. Once in a while, we take Fridays off, but we're here and we feel really blessed by it. So I'll start by saying that I've kind of always been in finance. Um, as a kid, I had a paper route. I was 11 years old, back when the Sunday version was the size of a log, and the Thanksgiving version you had to tote over your back because papers were big and heavy. And I would go out and I'd deliver papers in the morning. And back in the day, once a month, we'd go around and we would collect, all the paper route money, before ACH and all this fun stuff that we have now. And I would get, coins and dollar bills and $2 bills and $5 bills. And at 11 or 12, I would take my bills back. I'd iron them. I'd starch them. I'd stack them up facing the right way and organize them by serial number. Somehow I knew I was going to be in finance and I was going to take care of money. So it started there. I ended up going to school. I got a finance degree from Portland State. And even at that point, getting out of school, graduating with a finance degree and having a focus, there were so many pieces missing about personal finance because we were not taught several things in high school or college about personal finance that we really should. So over the course of the next couple of decades, we really had kind of the privilege of working with so many different families, and we saw their struggles, the things that they didn't know, the things that they needed to know, and it was a hodgepodge. Nobody had a perfect system, and so at one point, 10 years ago, we were inspired by one of our clients. I'll kind of get to her later. She's the godmother. And we decided that we were going to make this system that brought all these best practices into one spot and applied what we knew from decades of experience working with clients and create this system to help people organize. So that's kind of the origin of the playbook. And it's been an amazing adventure for us and a journey. And I'm excited to kind of share with you today a couple things. So the agenda for today is we're going to start with the why behind the playbook, and here I'm going to attempt to kind of tell you, why you need to have a playbook, why it's important, and hopefully you'll be inspired by the end of this conversation and say, "Boy, that is a really good idea. I need one of these." Then we're going to spend a little bit of time kind of briefly looking at, well, how do you assemble the playbook? And remember, the playbook is a physical thing. It's not just a book. It's a physical thing. So I'm going to kind of go through what that looks like building one. And then I'll dive a little deeper and get into the different subjects that are within the playbook. And then finally, at the end of today, we're going to tackle that first section, which is goals and objectives. And by the way, this is the section that is the most challenging for me by far, because it's a little subjective. Everybody has a different approach to goals and objectives. But I will say this, is that the most important thing we do is document what we want to have happen. And that communicates a lot to those that are taking over when we can't. And so really, you can do a lot of things wrong in your playbook. You can do a lot of things wrong in your finances. But when you have clearly articulated goals, boy, it can make a huge difference. So then next week, when we get together, oh, this is a big one. This is financial statements. So Jeff, you and I were talking right before we logged in here about the complexity of stuff that we get in the mail, the prospectuses and the reports and the expense ratios, the graphs, and all of this stuff. And so we're going to start to talk about what that means. What is that stuff that shows up in your mailbox or email? Is it important? What do you need to save? And then out of the stuff that you need to save, what do you do with it? And so in our playbook process, we've got a system, and we're going to dive into net worth statements. And then we're also going to talk about those company generated statements for the net worth statement that come in the mail. And we're going to talk about a cash flow statement. And we're going to talk about the company generated statements that are important for the cash flow statements. So we'll spend a little bit of time next session on those four subjects. Now, keep in mind that for each of these sessions, each week, there's a separate registration. So be sure to register for this 528 agenda meeting as well as the others as well. So the third week, we are going to talk about probably what is one of the most important and least looked at subjects for people that are 50 and older, people our age, is estate planning. And this is an area where we have really discovered that nobody really seems to get, and nobody, like the average person, how estate planning works. And yet, it's really not that complicated. Estate planning it's a pretty simple thing. Most of us just don't have the basics in place to make sure that we have a smooth transitioning estate, as well as the legal documents that protect us in the event the unforeseen happens. So we're going to talk about estate planning. We're going to talk about probate avoidance. And if you haven't been through probate or you haven't been subjected to that, the people that have don't want to do it. It's a long, arduous process. It's expensive, and it's very time consuming. We're going to talk about power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney. We're going to talk about fun things like TODs and PODs, just transfer on death and payable on death, and other fun acronyms. And then we're going to close this session out of all of this knowledge, we're going to talk about some strategies. What do you need to keep inside of your playbook and what's important to you? So that's our third session. The fourth session is also a big one. It's the insurance section. So we're going to dive into what you need to keep, what you need to consider with insurance. Now, I don't know about you, but my mailbox is often overwhelmed with insurance stuff, and making heads or tails of it is a process. And so we're going to try to carve out some reasons why we keep certain things and reasons why we're able to shred other things. We're also going to talk about Social Security and pensions. That's part of the playbook. It's its own section. We will talk about some strategies of when to file. We'll even talk about some of those loophole strategies that, Most of them have been fixed, so you can't use them anymore, but there's still kind of a few loopholes in the Social Security system. And we're going to talk about a fun subject, which nobody seems to want to address, but it is a real subject. It's the solvency of the Social Security system. Um, Additionally, we'll talk about tax planning strategies. And I get a kick out of this, but I think with taxes, it's really about making the tax preparer happy, right? So when I go to my licensed tax consultant or my CPA on tax day, I want to bring them all the stuff that they can kind of one touch the process. And what the playbook does for us is it gives us this year-long process of storing the right documents so we have a really easy transition on tax day. Finally, this will be our wrap-up day. And maybe what we'll do for this day is we'll do kind of an extended Q&A, time permitting. So I think by that point, we would have walked through every section of the playbook, and some of the clouds will be lifted a little bit, and you'll see kind of how they overlap, and it might generate some pretty good questions. So let me dive into kind of the why of the playbook. So one thing is the playbook is this process to dot the I's and cross the T's. And, we know that that's important. In finance, if you don't dot the I's and don't cross the T's, you end up with a bunch of L's. So L's are confusing when they're meant to be I's and T's. The problem with us is that in finance, things are very black and white. So if the will says this, or the trust says this, or the investment objective says this, it's taken very literally. So important for us to have a process to make sure that everything is set up just correctly. And the playbook does that for us. It gives us this really good review process. The other thing about the playbook that we'll kind of compare and contrast with maybe some other methods is it's not just an organizer. And I think it's really important to have an organization system. Being organized is kind of the grounds for being, thoughtful about what we're doing. I like a clean work desk, a clean workspace that allows me to put some quality thought in. But we need to take it a step further. And what the playbook does is it starts to outline, okay, now that we've got stuff organized, how do we refine it? How do we make executive decisions from the information that we have? So we're applying a little higher level, the accumulation of all the years of experiences that we've had working with clients in the playbook to help us make good decisions. The other thing about the playbook, the why, and really kind of, why we started the playbook and said, hey, we're going to see this through, was it's really about setting up a system for those that have to take over eventually for us. And again, we'll say it's not if, because eventually we either, are disabled or we pass on and somebody else comes along and picks up the pieces. So it's not an if, it's a when. And so that, that responsibility of kind of organizing things so that when somebody else comes along, they can easily continue the work that we're doing is really important to us and really important to a lot of people. So I'll kind of introduce the idea right now, or the topic of who we call the playbook godmother. And I'll tell a quick story about her. So we met her probably 20 years ago, and she had a very specific stated objective because her father had just passed away. And she had inherited his stuff, and his stuff was probated. It was confusing. It was a little bit of a mess. There was a substantial mystery around, does this account exist anymore? Does this account exist? What do I do with this? What does this mean? And that was a frustrating process. And it wasn't to say that her deceased father hadn't done a good job. Of course, he had. He'd done a great job accumulating and organizing. He just hadn't thought about how is somebody else going to view the information that I've gathered. And so the playbook is also about setting up this system so that when something happens to me, the person that takes over can easily jump in and know the important information so they can continue the legacy of what we have. So this particular client who we met 20 years ago was really good. She'd been through this experience and she came to us and she said, I really want to make sure that when I go, one, I want to leave my kids some assets because I love them. And two, I want to make sure that they have this seamless process and they're not subject to probate and they know everything. They know my wishes, they know my bequest, and that they're not fighting through probate. They're not having to hire attorneys unless they want to, but that it's very well documented. And I want everything to be right at their fingertips. And she had on her own, put some thought and effort into this by creating her own organizers. And she had, meticulously written down her budget, the cable bill is this, and, the mortgage is this, and insurance is this. And, so her kids would know who to call. And it was pretty good. And she started with this binder, and I think it was a 3.5-inch binder. And then pretty soon it grew to a 6-inch binder. And then at some point after a couple of years, she had 2 6-inch binders, and we thought, oh no, something is wrong here. So what is happening is her organization system is just accumulating more and more and more. And we said, hey, godmother, we didn't call her godmother at that point, but godmother, can we work with you on this to try to refine this process so that you can accomplish what you want to accomplish? And she said, yeah, let's collaborate. And so we developed this great collaborative partnership that has been fruitful, and we created the playbook as a result of the conversations that we had back and forth. And we were able to take her 2 6-inch binders and whittle it back down to 1 3.5-inch binder that has everything that she needs to have that smooth transition when somebody else needs to take over. So that's kind of the third point is, man, it's important. I kind of always joke, like my wife, she's a doctor of physical therapy. And she's not the finance person. I'm the finance guy. I'm still ironing my dollar bills once in a while and starching them when needed. But she doesn't look at the world the same way I do. So I've always taken care of the finances. But knowing that, she specializes in her area, I specialize in my area, I always say, honey, in the event something happens to be, you just go to my home office and you grab the big blue binder. And so it's very well understood. And so as I share that story with people, I say, when somebody needs to take over, they just go and grab the blue binder. It's like, oh, there's an aha moment. There's a little light bulb that comes on and says, oh yeah, I can create an easy path for somebody. And so that's really what it's about. It's making sure that when somebody takes over, it's easy for them. So made my point. I'll move on to the next point, which is reducing clutter. I will share with you that after 20 years of being in finance and being a money guy and having lots of interest, we have multiple accounts and nephews that we help out. And we've got lots of interest going, commercial properties. I mean, I'm a finance guy, so there's a lot happening. The complexities of my finance life got pretty big, and I started having filing cabinets in my home office after filing cabinets because I'm saving everything. And the USPS guy would deliver the prospectuses and stuff on mail day, and he'd bring it in a crate, and I'd spend a lot of time going through all this stuff because it was complex, and my filing cabinets kept growing. When I adopted the Playbook strategy, I was able to get rid of all my filing cabinets. And this is kind of amazing when I tell people, but my fairly complex financial life all fits in this 1 3.5-inch binder right here. So, I mean, I've got literally, from my perspective, everything I could possibly need, covering estate planning, taxes, insurance, investment accounts, everything right here. So, and what we're going to learn over the course of the next several weeks is why we can do that. And a lot of it is because we don't need to save everything. There's only so much stuff that we actually need to hang on to. And so we're going to learn about that process. And if you get through this process and you apply the playbook, you will lose pounds of paperwork in your home office. Imagine all the extra space that you're going to have and what you can do with that space. Somebody suggested you take those filing cabinets and you fill it full of sand, and you can have a little Zen sand garden. Sounds much better than collecting paperwork. So the final thing for why, and then I will say that this is going to come a little bit of a bias from being an advisor, but knowing how important this is to your tax person, your insurance person, your estate planning attorney, your legal counsel, having everything in one spot at your fingertips when you need it, all of the answers enables us to bring that information to the people that are advising us to give them all the information they need to do a really good job giving us counsel. And I think that's really important. One of the struggles that we've had as financial advisors and advocates is, people meet us for the first time and we say, oh, how about that pension plan? What's your social security going to be? What do your assets look like? What are your debt? And it's always, oh, well, I'll have to go check, or I'm not quite sure. I think I have social security. Of course, have you worked for 40 quarters? You have social security. So not having all that information at your fingertips doesn't enable you to have really good, meaningful and constructive conversations with your advisor. So I'm gonna keep hitting home on that, because I think it's a really important idea to think that, the people that work for us, the advisors, we don't work for them, they work for us, right? And so we need to clearly articulate what our goals are so they understand what we want, and then provide them with the information that they need to give us good advice. And that's kind of what the playbook does. So I'm going to pause there for a second and take a drink of water. It's 4:26. We're burning through this pretty fast. We've covered some pretty good ground already. And we're about ready to jump into the kind of the meat and potatoes of this, but I'll step back and say I'm going to show you kind of the 50,000 foot view of what's inside the playbook. So there's the title of the book is The 7 Fundamentals of Financial Planning. And so our approach was, well, let's think about all the most important things in financial planning and running a financial household. And we came up with 7. And 7 is such a great number. We stuck there, but there's really nothing else that we needed. Then we threw on an 8th section, which is miscellaneous, which we're not going to cover in this series. So even if you register for the following 3 in the individual links, we're not going to cover miscellaneous. So I'm going to say it. So for the bonuses, I'll tell you what the miscellaneous is for. The miscellaneous is for anything that you don't feel like is covered in one of the other sections. You've got a spot for it. And I'll give you a quick example of that. I think it's important to kind of monitor credit. And for me, I wasn't sure where that fit. It probably fits in financial statements or, maybe insurance if it's a risk thing. But every year or so, I'll run a credit report for our household and I'll stick it in the miscellaneous. Another thing that I do is I write, maybe I'll write a love letter to my spouse, do not open until Ben needs you to. And then I'll stick it in that section so she's got access to it. I need to update that, by the way. So working from the top to the bottom, the first thing we're going to cover today is goals and objectives. And goals and objectives is really about articulating and understanding, what your wishes are so we can communicate them to other people, whether that be our advisors or whether that be our kids or whoever takes over for us. Then we're going to jump into financial statements. And again, it's cash flow statement, it's company generated statements, it's net worth statement, which is really the cornerstone for all the finance information that we need. We're going to talk about estate and legal documents. That's the 3rd section. The 4th section is insurance. 5th being taxes. Next, performance. I'll touch on performance. We're not going to get into great detail on performance, but we have to track performance if we have investments. It's a mandatory, right? We have to see kind of what the rest of the world is doing relative to what we're doing so we can have a gauge or a sense of, are we participating in the markets that we want to? Are we avoiding unnecessary risk? It's certainly important. We won't cover a lot of it, but I'm welcome to take Q&A on that. Finally, we're going to talk about Social Security and pensions in the last section before miscellaneous. So it's a lot to cover. I always think like the playbook process, the reason that we don't just sell a box with a bunch of tabs on it is because it doesn't do anybody any good. I mean, having an organization system is wonderful, but it is a little bit of a journey to find out, now that we've got an organization system, how do we apply some disciplines to this to really take it to the next level? So I'm giving you a lot of work ahead of time, But once you do the playbook and once you set it up, maintenance is really easy and it becomes a very effective process. So I took a snapshot of our webpage, as you see on the right side of your screen. If you go to elevate615.com, one of our tabs is the playbook. And if you click on that tab, it'll bring you to this particular page where like, you scroll down a little ways. There are a few dozen videos that we've recorded that dive really deep into each of these sections. So in addition to being able to watch this webinar on YouTube in a week or 10 days, and then revisit the other ones as well. And of course, you can buy the book as well that dives really deep. You can also watch the videos. So we're trying to make it easy so that people can continue the journey, continue the education, and answer your questions. And I'll also say that our whole team at Elevate is very passionate about the playbook. We love it. We love what we do. And we're more than happy to answer emails. If you just want to fire out a question to us, we're there for you too. It's something that we want to see people adopt and make the most of. Okay, so let's see. We're going to talk about assembling your playbook next. So we're doing good pace wise. We're about halfway through the material, and we're about halfway through the time, maybe a little ahead of schedule. So I'll take a little time and talk about the reason that we came up with the playbook color and the size. So first of all, remember that it is a book, but it's also this physical thing. So we chose to do a 3.5-inch binder, not being completely sure if it would do the job. But after assembling mine, I'm very confident that most of us, if not all of us, with the exception of maybe the 1%, which, if they're on this webinar, thank you for joining us. This would accommodate just about everybody's household finances. So we'll get there. It might seem like, oh, that's impossible because I have 5 filing cabinets, but we'll get there. Stick with me. So the first step is to buy a 3.5-inch binder. Now, I chose blue and bright blue and made it really shiny. And of course, we branded it with our business, but I also wanted it to be something that was visible, and could easily be spot by somebody coming in. So choose a bright color. If you make it a white, nobody's going to notice it. So get some color to it. Some people say, well, I keep my playbook in our safe or something like that, and that's fine because sometimes we're going to hold some financial statements in here that might have account numbers on it and so on and so forth. So you can set up your own caution and protections. We don't put social security numbers in here, driver's license informations. We don't put passwords in here. That's our preference, just because I like to leave mine out accessible, just in case something happens. So you can be as guarded as you want, but once you get it assembled, put it where you like. The next thing you would do after you get the binder, and again, a bright blue is a good color choice for me. You want to assemble kind of the tabs on the inside. So this is, as we organize, this is certainly key. I don't know how that's coming across, but I've got 8 different tabs inside of the playbook separating all of the sections. We've bought dozens of these, and we assemble them for clients, and this is certainly a simple process of just labeling individual tabs just so you can separate stuff. Now, there's going to be a temptation to not put tabs in. That's the first temptation that we have to overcome. And I'm here to tell you that if you have a binder just full of stuff with no separations and dividers, it's going to get complicated. So make sure that you've got some dividers in there. When we first did our first version of the playbook, we had our dividers and a three-hole punch binder. And then I must have bought dozens of these, little 3-hole punchers. And I kept having the 3-hole punch stuff. And clients would bring their stuff in, and we 3-hole punch stuff. And we ended up with, and it was like confetti everywhere, right? So little white confetti things are all over the place from the little hole punches. And then at some point, I think it was the godmother who came back in and said, "Hey, Ben, guess what? I found for you. I found these things. And these are little plastic covers. You can buy them at an office supply store or Amazon or something." And I think in my book, I might have, 20 or 30 of these things because you could put a lot of paper in one. You can put, multiple statements. And so you've got these things available to you, and it'll save a lot of the work of having the three-hole punch. This is kind of this is the construction segment of the presentation. So next, once we've got it created, we've got the book, we've got the dividers. We're utilizing this lovely tool of the plastic sleeves. The next thing we do is fill it up. And again, when we're filling it up, we're going to do it methodically and thoughtfully, using the knowledge that we're going to talk about over the next 3 webinars, as well as the book, or the YouTube or our website, where you can kind of learn about how do we fill it up. So that's the big challenge, is when it comes to filling it up, let's be thoughtful about it. Once that's done, once you've got your playbook created, and so I think when I created my first playbook for myself, I did it, and it probably took me 6 months because I was stumbling through it. I mean, it was the first time. I was the beta, and it took me a while to get through it. Now I'm confident that within a month, just having mail come in, I could fill up my playbook and have it set for the year. And it's not a month's worth of work. It's just, tending to it over the course of the month. Once the playbook is done, once I've got this process, once I've got this easy, kind of outline process for people to follow, then I just maintain it and share it. I share it with the professionals that give me advice. I share it with my counsel, and I maintain it instead of maintaining my filing cabinets. Now, what does maintenance look like? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we got a couple of questions from El Narayan. Forgive me if I pronounce it wrong. Why accumulate paper? Why not create an Excel spreadsheet version of the playbook, which is easy to maintain and store and back up and pass along? Each session can be a tab within the Excel workbook. Thoughts?
Yeah, a great question. And I would say that that might work. I would say the advantage of saving certain documents will probably shed some light when we talk about the financial statements in the next section, as well as the estate planning and legal documents in an additional section. So there's some documents that you just can't replicate. So when you, for example, you're opening an account at one place and maybe you want to transfer assets at another place, still in this day and age, the transferring company wants a copy of the statement. Another example might be if you're buying a property and you want to get a mortgage on it, the mortgage company wants to see a copy of that statement. Also, when it comes to estate planning, having an actual copy of the power of attorney, or an actual copy of a will or a trust rather than a digital, tends to be a lot easier for us. So for that reason, we've always said, hey, let's have one copy of each important relationship, and call it good. But I like your idea. I mean, because I think the idea of making it simple, and striving for simplicity, is really going to make it easy for those that take over for us.
El Narayan had says that that they already did this for their family, and even maintaining an Excel file is quite a lot of work, and agrees with something that you said earlier. It took a few months to create the Excel workbook.
For sure. And to your point, I will congratulate you on thinking probably in the next step is that, an Excel workbook is really cool because we can save it to our hard drive, and then we can upload it to the cloud securely in a secure spot. And then in the event that the house burns down, we don't have to worry about our playbook burning up. So there is that advantage of being digital. Kind of the next migration for us, and what we've done is we've taken our playbook and digitized it as well, and then upload it in the event that something happens, so it's digital. You're right; it is a lot of work initially, but I think we found a few shortcuts along the way. So, one I would say is that the Excel spreadsheet does require some data entry and typing. We're just hanging onto that statement, sticking it into the plastic sleeve. A little laborious, but easy to do. Yeah. And congratulations for being thoughtful and proactive about your own finances. Um, Good job. Huh. By the way, I don't know if you can see my screen. I just discovered that Apple did this funny thing where they're picking up on hand gestures now and giving us some fun, kind of celebratory stuff in the background. That wasn't intentional. We discovered this today during a team meeting, and I thought, oh, it'd be fun to try during our webinar today. So,
Well, thank you is the comment.
Diving back in. So maintenance is it's really not that big of a deal. Once we've created it, maintaining it it's pretty seamless, and it's just part of like my regular routine now. So I'll talk about more in depth when we get into financial statements. But I tend to shred most of what comes into my house, and I save very little, but I have a discerning eye for what I need to save. And then when I save that document, I'm typically replacing an older document in my playbook. And that's why I get it kind of nice and lean and mean. So, so that's kind of building out the playbook. So we're at the point now where we're going to dive into to the main course. We're going to talk about the goals and objectives. Um, but first, I want to talk about one more, I guess, appetizer, which is the MVP list, most valuable player list, and just talk about this for a second. So this is a one pager that goes on top of my playbook. So it's the very first thing in the playbook. And it kind of plays into that theme, like, when somebody takes over to me, what's the first thing they do? And so this most valuable player list is all the people that, I presume my wife or, if we die in each other's arms, our kids or whoever, need to contact in order to continue on. So I'm going to have my financial planner, my estate planning attorney, a pastor, doctor, insurance agent, real estate agent, anybody in my life that is influential that will need to know that something's happened to me, and that my kids or my wife will need to take counsel from. So it's all on that very front page. So when we open up the playbook, this is the first thing they see. So we call it the MVP list. You can call it whatever you want, but just a kind of a list of all those key important contact people, front and center. And I find that the idea of losing a loved one or having a loved one in crisis, we're not going to want to spend a lot of time flipping through finding the estate documents or what financials documents. Sometimes it's just easier to call the financial planner and then still have all that stuff for backup. So this is the tip is to create something like this for yourself. Put it on the very first page of the playbook. We have this as a download on our website. If you can certainly create your own. I think we just have either an Excel or Word document here with just title, name, phone, and email address. But if you are so inclined, you can download it from our website as well. Okay, so we're going to dive in now to the topic for tonight, which is goals and objectives. I think my mom cringes when I say if it ain't writ, it ain't, because it might not be the best English, but I think it gets the point across is that writing something down is powerful. And that is why we write down goals. So there have been lots of studies and references to the power of documenting your goals and writing things down. It helps us concentrate our efforts, clarify our thoughts to the point where we can articulate and communicate very effectively to other people what we want. And I think that is so important. And this is really an easy thing to skip. It's an easy thing to kind of brush past this one. Maybe that's why we put it at the very front of the playbook, because I think it's important and it's a good process to work through. I think knowing what I know now about the relationship that I have with people that I trust that are working for me, and the understanding of kind of being a business owner, and the playbook is helping me run my household like a business. My advisors are employees to some degree, right? I mean, I pay the attorney, I pay the CPA. I mean, they're working for me. So just like an employee or a team member here, I want to make sure that I'm communicating, hey, this is what we're doing today. This is our goal. These are our objectives. I have to be very clear about that. And so, to the extent that I can document my goals and objectives and be very clear, and then communicate those goals and objectives to the people that are helping me, working for me, consulting me, I've kind of created an obligation on their behalf. Because if I'm vague and I'm uncertain, I don't know what I'm going to get. But if I'm precise and exact and a clarified goal, and I've clearly told them what I want, I've kind of got them accountable for that. And so that's kind of what we're going for with goals and objectives, is we want to write down kind of what we want and then be able to clearly communicate that to the people that are helping us, as well as the people that are taking over for us. And then we're going to see more success. And I didn't bother to back up studies. I think it's almost empirical evidence at this point. Everybody understands. It's just often hard to do. So on the right side of the screen, we threw a picture of the godmother in here, who got a kick out of this. She embraced the role of the godmother and came in to the office one day dressed up as the godmother. And so we proudly hang this in our office as one of the most fun things that we've got. Our advocate, our partner, our collaborator in the Playbook process. So we're eternally grateful, godmother. Just been a journey. I wanted to give an example of a goal and objective that kind of we walk people through at the office. And this is one that we kind of created from our bias as financial advisors. So we documented things like time horizon. We documented risk tolerance, growth versus income. Some more common things that we tend to see people have as part of their own personal goals are going to be probate, addressing bequests, special needs, those type of things are pretty good goals. So, I mean, I think a playbook should have, some general goals and objectives. I think it's important for us as advisors, and for those taking over, obviously. There are so many different formats that exist. This is why it's subjective and difficult for me being a finance guy. I wish my wife was here to tell you about all the different ways you could do this. But the next slide, I'll kind of run through a couple more strategies. Just what I'm trying to do today isn't tell you how to document your goals and objectives, because I will struggle with this. But what I want to do is to create the sense of why it's important for you to document some goals and objectives, and then for you to find the meaningful way for you to document your own goals and objectives. So a couple things that I think are important, regardless of whether you're presenting this to a finance person or a trust person or so on and so forth, is address, are your assets meant for growth at this point, or are they meant for income or preservation? I think that's an important one. I think what it does is it communicates a message to your financial advisor, certainly, but then also to those taking over. So I'll give an example of, if you say, hey, my objective, because, maybe we're independently wealthy or we've got enough money that we don't worry too much about growth. We know we can live within our means. We've done all this stuff. We want consistency and reliability. At some point, though, if your portfolio or your investments or your choices drift a little bit, maybe you start buying, tech stocks or biochip stocks or something, and your trusted contact comes in, and let's say that trusted contact is your, that one responsible child you have, and says, hey, let's see where you're at. And she notices that you've got all this, pharma tech stuff, and then, knows that your goals are income or capital preservation. They can have this meaningful dialogue like, well, how did you get here? And you might say, oh, my financial advisor told me this is a hot stock, and we can kind of see there's some problems there. The other thing that you certainly want to address are bequests. Do you want to leave assets to a certain person or a charity or a kid? I mean, I think that's a great, in your playbook is a great spot to document that. I think some of us have this tendency to think, oh, well, we've addressed that in our will. And I would say, first of all, let's save that conversation for our third webinar, which you register separately for. But the will governs the probate process, so not the most useful asset anyway. Much rather have you have a trust. But having documented goals and objectives should align with your legal documents. So your trust should indicate what you want to have happen ultimately. But trusts are 60 or 70 pages, right? They're complex. It takes a lot to go through a trust document. Goals and objectives you can have down in one or two paragraphs or 2 or 3 pages. It's quite easy. Remember, attorneys get paid by the word. Your goals and objectives can be kind of concise. I would address how risky you want to be, what your biases are towards or against insurance, and then of course, do you want probate avoidance? Is that important? Do you want tax reduction, or do you care? One other thing I'll throw out is the idea that I've had clients that say, my kids are fine, they're okay. Anything I have left over, I want to go to them. But my objective and goal is to maximize the benefit of what I have over my life expectancy. That in itself is a goal and a powerful one because it communicates to a lot of people what your expectations are. Um, uh, by the way, another
Question.
fun picture. Yeah.
So, is growth meaning that the value of the stock grows, income is good dividends, and preservation is just kind of steady, conservative, low interest, less risky? Is that what those mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, thank you. And that's a really good question. Sometimes I forget how ambiguous those terms can be because I've been ingrained in it for so long. And I'll speak freely. Growth to me, and I think to our industry, means that you expect the assets to increase in value. That's kind of the objective. And I think income means that you expect the assets to stay the same value, but they're kicking off a dividend and providing income for you. So, for example, a bond is a good income asset. Preservation just means that you don't want it to lose value. Now, preservation and income could be kind of the same thing because preservation means that it's just invested so conservatively that it doesn't pay much income, but it becomes more of an important overriding rule than income. Income, you might tolerate a little volatility. Preservation means you don't want it to go down. And one example I can think is like when somebody says, I want to leave, X amount of money to my kids, and it has to be that amount of money. And I have an insurance bias, so I don't want to buy an insurance policy because they always win. They're actuaries, they're smart. So I want to lock up this money and preserve it and make sure that it doesn't fall below this certain threshold. So that might be a preservation strategy. Thank you for the question. Thank you. All right, my next slide and my favorite picture of this whole slide deck. I don't know why, it's just adorable. I can't imagine that's real ice cream. Um, this is the point of the presentation where it's 4:52, so we're kind of wrapping up, and I still have a couple stories I want to finish real quick. So I'll just say that I'm trying to give you a couple starting points for writing out your goals and objectives. It's overwhelming, at least to me. The way I did my goals and objectives is I made bullet points, just like any good business student would, right? Bullet point this, bullet point this, bullet point this. That worked for me. I was able to crank out a list pretty quickly. It didn't take me that long, and that was my starting point. Other formats that I've seen people do, current goals and future goals. Here's what we want to do now. Here's our objective. We want to buy this. We want to do this. We want to remodel this. We're in the process of doing this. In the future, we'd like to buy a yacht and sail around the world. In the future, we'd like to leave bequest to XYZ. You can also extrapolate on that a little bit and say, these were our goals, kind of the past, the present, and the future. I always love this format. We do this at our team meetings every week, last week, this week, and next week. Kind of fun to learn from what our past goals were and to document them and review them and see them. It's kind of part of that legacy. And then our present goals and our future goals. Finally, the last one that really has been impactful and I've seen people do because it doesn't get into the weeds of details as much as it provides context around here's what we want, which would be like a purpose statement goal. So for example, we would like our assets to support education, discovery, space travel, liberty, free will, liberation, fair trade, those kind of purpose statement goals. We want to make sure that our assets are divided up amongst all of our loved ones included in our will equally with no problems. Those can be powerful as well. So hopefully that will get you a good kind of starting point and provide you with a little stepping stone for moving forward. If you want bonus extra credit, which is how we got out of school sometimes, if you want to apply this like a business, use the SWOT analysis. What are the strengths of your finances? What are the weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? You can kind of apply this business tool to say, hey, and we're running our household like a business. What are the things that we need to be worried about? What are the things that are working well for us? What are the things that we need to be looking out for? So finally, and I have 1 minute to tell you two really quick stories of why goals can be important. One, we've had a client come in that has said, hey, we got to avoid probate at all costs because we saw our parents go through that. They wrote that down as an objective. We took it upon ourselves to say, okay, we're diligently going through every single asset, every single account. We're going to make sure that registrations are very clear. And because that was one of their written goals, every time we did a review for them, we paid particular attention to looking at new additional outside accounts and pointed out that, hey, you opened up this account at this particular bank and it's not in your trust or it doesn't have a beneficiary on it. Now it's subject to probate. Knowing that that was a really important thing, having a written goal and objective allowed us to give them good advice. Another one would be, last example would be a client that maybe has a special needs child. Being able to document that, hey, I got to make sure that this particular child is provided for and making that an integral part of their estate plan has been very effective for their estate planning attorneys. So with that, I'm 1 minute past. This was our agenda today. We covered the why, we covered the how-to, we covered the overview of the playbook, and then we dove into goals and objectives. So I hope everybody can join us for our next session next week. And I'm happy to answer more Q&A then as well. So thank you for your time today. In the meantime, I can show you one more fun little Apple Me. Oh, I showed you that one. What was the other one? There was this one. Kind of the peace sign does balloons. And then I think if I do this right, it goes. Oh, there we go. So I've loved being
Wow.
here tonight.